The town bank stood tall in the center of the main street. Its white walls and wide glass doors made it shine brighter than the other buildings. People entered and left all day carrying money, signing papers, or waiting in long lines. The workers inside were always dressed in neat suits, and they spoke in firm voices. To many, this bank was a place of rules and respect, but respect was only shown to those who looked rich and important. One bright morning, an old man walked slowly toward the bank. His steps were heavy, and his shoes looked worn from long use. His clothes were faded, and his hair was white. On his shoulder he carried a brown sack that looked full and heavy. Some people waiting outside noticed him. They whispered among themselves, wondering why such an old man would bring a sack to the bank. Some looked at him with pity while others tried to hide their laughter. The old man reached the steps and paused for a moment as if gathering his strength. Then he pushed the glass doors and stepped inside. The cool air of the bank surrounded him, and his eyes looked around the large hall with its polished floor and shining counters. The sound of his sack dragging across the floor echoed in the room, making people turn their heads toward him. The security guard frowned and stepped closer, ready to stop him if he caused trouble. The clerks behind the counter shared glances and small smiles. To them, he looked like just another poor wanderer who had nothing to do in a place like this. The old man placed the sack firmly on the floor in front of everyone. His back was straight and his voice was clear when he spoke. "I have come to claim this bank," he said. For a moment the room was silent. Then laughter filled the air. One clerk tried to cover his mouth, another whispered something to a colleague, and a group of young men waiting in line laughed loudly. To them the old man's words sounded foolish. They believed he must be confused or mad to say such a thing, but the old man did not smile. His eyes remained calm as he looked toward the glass office where the bank manager sat. With slow steps he began to walk in that direction, pulling the sack behind him. Every sound of the sack brushing against the floor seemed louder than the laughter. The manager, a tall man named Paul, noticed the scene. He adjusted his tie and came out of his office. His shoes were polished and his face carried an expression of control. He folded his arms and looked down at the old man. "Sir, I think you are confused," Paul said in a polite but firm voice. "This is a bank, not a place for games." The old man raised his head and answered without fear, "I am not confused. I have proof. This bank belongs to me." Again the hall filled with laughter. A young man in line clapped his hands and shouted, "Next he will say he owns the whole town." Others chuckled and shook their heads, amused by the strange claim. Yet there was something in the old man's eyes that made a few people hesitate. His voice was steady and his posture strong. He did not look like a man lost in dreams. He reached down and touched the sack, but instead of opening it, he tightened the knot and placed it carefully by his feet as if guarding it. Curiosity began to spread. People wondered what the sack contained. Some thought it held only stones. Others believed it was empty. The guard stepped closer, ready to escort the man out, but the manager raised his hand to stop him. "Let him speak," Paul said, his lips curling into a half-smile. The old man nodded. "I will speak. But I will also show. This sack is not a burden. It is my key, and when I open it, your laughter will end." The laughter in the hall grew softer, replaced by murmurs. The old man bent slightly and looked straight into the eyes of the manager. "Do you want me to prove it here before all these people, or in your office where no one will disturb us?" Paul frowned. He was certain the man was only wasting time, yet a spark of curiosity rose in him. Confidence like that was not easy to fake. Finally, Paul said, "Very well. Come into my office." The old man lifted the sack again. Though heavy, he carried it with steady arms. Every pair of eyes in the bank followed him as he walked behind the manager. Some still laughed quietly, but many had stopped. Whispers spread among the crowd, each person guessing what might be inside the sack. For the first time, a sense of doubt replaced their laughter. The office of the manager was large and neat. A long table stood in the middle with chairs on both sides. Behind the table was a wide shelf full of files and documents. On the wall hung a large picture of the bank's founder. The air smelled of polished wood and old paper. The old man entered slowly, his sack in hand. He placed it gently on the floor beside him. The manager, Paul, closed the glass door and stood with folded arms. His eyes studied the old man carefully. "Now we are away from the crowd," Paul said. "Explain yourself. What makes you believe you own this bank?" The old man did not sit. He kept standing with his back straight. His voice was calm as he spoke. This bank was not always as you see it. Many years ago, when the town was small and poor, a group of men needed land to build it. They came to me. I gave them what they asked for, and in return I was given ownership papers. For many years I stayed away watching the town grow, but now I have returned to claim what is mine. Paul raised his eyebrows. He could not believe the story. That is impossible. This bank has been here for 40 years. Our records show no sign of your name. Do you even have proof? The old man bent down and untied the knot of his sack. The sound of the rope loosening was soft but firm. Slowly, he opened the mouth of the sack and pulled out a bundle of old papers tied together with string. He placed them on the manager's desk. These are the documents, the old man said. They carry the signatures of the men who built this bank and the mark of the land office. Read them before you laugh again. Paul hesitated. He expected nothing but worthless scraps. Still, curiosity pushed him to untie the string. He unfolded the first paper and scanned the lines. His face changed. The paper was old, its edges yellow, but the ink was clear. The name of the land, the date, and the signatures were written clearly. At the bottom was an official seal from the office of that time. Paul frowned and looked at another paper. Again, he saw marks of land transfer with the old man's name on it. He looked up sharply. Where did you get these? The old man's eyes did not blink. They were given to me by the men who needed my land. The founder himself signed them. Paul leaned back in his chair. He could not deny the papers looked real, but he still did not want to believe. These could be clever copies, he said. Why should I take your word? The old man placed his hand on the sack again. There is more. Would you like me to show you? Paul hesitated. His heart was beating faster now. Something inside told him the man might not be lying. Yet he did not want to show weakness. Yes, he said firmly. Show me what else you carry. The old man reached deeper into the sack and brought out a small wooden box. Its surface was scratched and its lock was rusty. He placed it on the desk. This box has been with me since the day I gave the land, he explained. Inside are letters, maps, and the founder's personal note to me. Paul stared at the box, his throat dry. Slowly, he opened it. Inside were folded letters, carefully kept, though the paper was old. He pulled one out and read. The words were written in neat handwriting, thanking the old man for his land and promising him rightful ownership of the bank when it was built. The letter was signed with the founder's name. Paul felt his mouth go dry. He looked up at the old man who stood silent, watching. For the first time, Paul did not know what to say. Outside the office, the clerks and customers waited. Some pressed their faces to the glass, trying to see what was happening. The security guard stood by the door uneasy. Whispers filled the hall. Inside, Paul set the letter down. If these are true, he said slowly, then why did you wait all these years? Why not claim your right when the bank was first built? The old man looked down at the sack, then back at Paul. His eyes were filled with memories. Because I wanted to see the town grow. I wanted the bank to be strong before I stepped forward. I am not here to take from it. I am here to remind it who gave it birth. Paul sat back, stunned. The old man's voice carried no anger, only truth. He knew the crowd outside still laughed, but soon their laughter would turn to silence. The sack still rested by the old man's side, and it was clear there was more inside it, waiting to be revealed. The sound of voices outside the office grew louder. People wanted to know what was happening inside. Some laughed and joked, others grew restless. They could see the old man standing with his sack, and they saw the manager sitting with papers spread on his desk. But they could not hear the words exchanged between them. Inside, Paul kept reading. Each paper he touched carried more weight than the last. The letters, the signatures, the seal of the land office, everything pointed toward one truth. Yet his mind fought against it. How could this old man, who looked so poor, be the rightful owner of the Grand Bank? The old man spoke again, breaking the silence. I do not expect you to believe at once. But truth does not change because of laughter. It waits. It always waits. Paul pressed his lips together. He closed the wooden box and pushed it aside. These papers must be checked by experts, he said. Only then can we say if they are real. The old man nodded calmly. Check them. Bring your lawyers, bring your clerks, search your records. You will see I speak the truth. Paul stood up and walked to the glass door. He opened it, and at once the crowd outside leaned forward. Everyone back to your business, he said firmly. This matter is official. But no one moved. Curiosity held them in place. The old man lifted his sack and walked out of the office, his face steady. The crowd stared at him, some with laughter still on their lips, others with doubt in their eyes. One young man shouted, "Did he prove it, manager? Or is he just telling stories?" Paul did not answer. Instead, he ordered the guard to keep the people away. Then he called for 2 senior clerks. "Take these papers to the records room," he said. "Compare them with the old files. I want answers quickly." The clerks obeyed, though their eyes showed surprise. They carried the bundle of documents with care. The old man watched them go, then sat quietly on a chair near the hall, keeping his sack by his side. Time passed slowly. People whispered and argued about him. Some said he was mad. Some said he might be a trickster. Others, seeing his calmness, began to wonder if he truly carried hidden power. Children who came with their parents stared at the sack, curious about what else was inside. At last, the 2 clerks returned. Their faces were pale. They placed the documents on the manager's desk again. One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, we checked. The signatures match the old files. The seal is the same. These papers are real." A hush fell over the hall. Even those who had laughed stopped talking. The word spread quickly from mouth to mouth. The papers were real. The old man was not lying. Paul felt heat rise to his face. For years, he had worked in the bank with pride, believing he knew everything about its history. Yet here was proof of a hidden truth. He turned to the old man. "If these are real, then the matter is serious. But ownership cannot change with a simple claim. It must be decided by the law." The old man rose from his chair. His eyes were calm, but his voice carried strength. "The law is already written in those papers. Still, I do not wish to bring harm. I am not here to destroy what has been built. I only want what is mine by right." The crowd listened with wide eyes. The laughter that had once filled the hall was gone. In its place was silence, broken only by the sound of footsteps and whispers. Paul felt the weight of the moment. He could no longer treat the old man as a fool. He straightened his coat and said, "We will hold a meeting tomorrow. Lawyers will come and we will decide this matter. Until then, these documents will stay locked in the bank safe." The old man nodded. "Lock them. They will still speak the same truth tomorrow." As he spoke, he lifted the sack again as if to remind them that more still lay hidden inside. The eyes of the crowd followed the sack with wonder and fear. The old man walked slowly out of the bank, leaving behind silence and uneasy faces. For the first time, the people who had laughed began to feel regret. The evening sun painted the town in shades of gold as the old man walked away from the bank. His sack rested on his shoulder, and his steps were steady though slow. Behind him, whispers still filled the streets. People who had seen him inside the bank spread the story quickly. Some said he was the real owner of the bank. Others claimed it was a clever trick. But no one could deny that the papers he showed looked real. The old man walked to a small inn at the corner of the street. The keeper, a kind woman named Mary, greeted him with a smile. She had seen him many times in the past few days, for he often came to her inn to eat and rest. "You look tired," she said softly as he entered. The old man nodded. "I have carried a heavy weight for many years. Today part of it was shown, but much remains." Mary gave him a seat near the window and brought him a plate of food. He ate slowly, his thoughts deep. She wanted to ask about the sack, but she respected his silence. While he rested, the town buzzed with talk. In small shops, in tea stalls, and in homes, people discussed the strange event. Some laughed, saying tomorrow the man would be sent away, but many others felt uncertain. They spoke of the documents, the seal, and the way the clerks had returned pale-faced. It was hard to deny that something true was hidden in the old man's words. Inside the bank, Paul, the manager, locked the papers carefully in the safe. He could not sleep easily that night. He paced in his office long after everyone had left. His mind was full of questions. Could the old man truly be the rightful owner? If so, what would happen to his position? Would the bank fall under new control? The thought filled him with unease. The next morning came bright and clear. The old man rose early, took his sack, and returned to the bank. He walked slowly through the streets, but this time people did not laugh as he passed. They moved aside and watched with curious eyes. Some even greeted him politely, unsure whether he might soon hold great power. At the bank, a crowd had already gathered. Lawyers from the town arrived, carrying books and papers. The clerks stood ready, their faces serious. Paul was in his office again, his tie tight and his expression tense. He had called for this meeting to settle the matter once and for all. When the old man entered, silence fell across the hall. He placed his sack on the floor as before and greeted no one. His calmness filled the room with a strange weight. Paul cleared his throat. Today we will hear the claims. The papers you showed yesterday will be studied by our lawyers. If they are true, then we will follow the law. If they are false, you will leave this bank and never return. The old man simply nodded. I am ready. The truth is not afraid of the law. The lawyers opened the bundle of documents and spread them on the table. They compared the seals with old books, checked the handwriting, and read the letters carefully. The room stayed silent, every person waiting for their words. After some time, one lawyer looked up. His voice was firm. The papers are genuine. They are old, but the marks are clear. The signatures match the records of the founder and his partners. There can be no doubt that this man was promised ownership. Gasps filled the hall. Some people covered their mouths. Others whispered in disbelief. The truth was stronger than laughter. Paul's face turned pale. He stood frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Then what does this mean? He asked slowly. The lawyer answered, It means the old man has the right to claim the bank. The promise made to him was legal. If he takes this matter to court, the judgment will favor him. All eyes turned toward the old man. He stood tall, his hand resting on his sack. His voice was steady. I do not seek to bring ruin. I only seek respect for the truth. For years, this bank stood on land that was mine. Today you know it. Tomorrow you must decide how you will honor it. The crowd was silent. The laughter that had filled the hall on the first day was gone. In its place stood fear, regret, and wonder. The old man lifted his sack again. His eyes swept across the room. I have shown only part of what I carry. If you wish to see more, I will show it. But know this. Truth grows heavier the longer it is hidden. His words echoed through the hall. The people who had mocked him felt shame rise in their hearts. For the first time, they believed that the sack carried more than paper. It carried power. The air inside the bank was heavy with silence after the lawyer's words. People looked at the old man with new eyes. Only a day before they had laughed at him, but now many lowered their heads in shame. The truth had spoken louder than their laughter. Paul, the manager, tried to keep control. He straightened his coat and cleared his throat. Even if the papers are real, he said, there are rules to follow. Ownership must pass through many steps. This matter cannot be solved in one morning. The old man nodded. I understand rules. But rules cannot erase truth. I will wait, but I will not go away. My claim is not a story. It is written and signed, the crowd murmured, impressed by his calmness. Some clerks whispered that the old man looked stronger than his age. He did not bend under pressure, and he spoke as if time itself was his ally. Paul turned to the lawyers. We will need to study further. Until then, these documents must stay with us. The old man shook his head. The papers will remain in the sack. I trusted once and I waited 40 years. I will not risk them again. If you want to study them, I will bring them when the court asks. Not before. His voice was firm. No one dared argue. Paul felt his pride wounded, but he could not push further. He realized that the more he resisted, the more people began to side with the old man. At that moment, a young clerk named Adam stepped forward. He was quiet by nature and often unnoticed in the bank, but his voice now carried clear across the hall. Sir, he said to Paul, if the papers are genuine, we must honor them. The founder gave his word. If we deny it, we deny the very roots of this bank. All eyes turned to Adam. Some clerks nodded. The crowd whispered again. Paul's jaw tightened. He was losing the control he always had. The old man looked at Adam and gave a small nod. You understand. A word given is not less than gold. A promise kept is stronger than stone. Paul tried to regain command. Enough. This discussion will not continue here. We will set another meeting with higher officials. Until then, I ask everyone to leave. The people obeyed slowly, but they left with heavy thoughts. Many whispered to each other on the way out, speaking not of Paul but of the old man with the sack. His calmness, his papers, his strength of voice had left a mark on their minds. When the hall grew empty, Paul returned to his office. He sat down, his hands trembling. His career, his power, his pride all seemed to stand on weak ground. If the old man's claim proved true, what would become of him? Would he lose his position? Would the bank fall under new command? The thought burned inside him like fire. Meanwhile, the old man walked out of the bank with slow but steady steps. The sun was high and the streets were busy, but wherever he passed, people stopped and looked. Some greeted him with respect. Others only stared in silence. The sack on his shoulder drew every eye. He went back to the inn where Mary welcomed him. She had heard the talk in the market and now looked at him with wide eyes. Is it true? Did they really say the papers are real? The old man placed the sack gently on the floor and nodded. The truth was always there. It only needed to be seen. Mary shook her head in wonder. I have seen many men come and go, but none carried such strength in silence. They laughed at you and now they bow their heads. The old man gave a faint smile. Laughter is light. It fades quickly when the sun of truth rises. That night the inn was full of noise. Travelers, workers, and townsfolk all talked about the bank. Many came to the inn hoping to see the old man, but he stayed in his room, resting. Only Mary brought him food and kept others away. Far across town, Paul sat alone in his office. He looked again at the picture of the founder hanging on the wall. For the first time, he felt the eyes of that picture staring back at him. He whispered to himself, what if he is truly the owner? What will become of me? The bank was no longer a place of order and calm. It had become a stage where truth and pride stood face to face. And everyone knew that the old man had only shown part of what was inside his sack. The town waited, restless, for what would come next. The night after the meeting, the town could not rest. In houses and shops, people spoke of nothing but the old man with the sack. Some said he would soon take control of the bank. Others argued that the manager would never allow it. A few believed the matter would go to court, and the whole town would watch history being written. In his room at the inn, the old man sat by the window. The moonlight fell across his face, showing lines of age and strength. His sack rested near his feet as if it never left his side. He touched it lightly as one touches a trusted friend. His eyes looked far away beyond the town into years gone by. Mary, the innkeeper, knocked softly on his door and brought him warm tea. She placed it on the table and looked at him kindly. You carry a heavy story, she said. Do you never feel afraid standing against so many people? The old man lifted the cup and took a slow sip. I feared once, he answered, when I thought truth would be lost forever. But fear ends when one decides to stand. What is laughter against truth? Nothing but passing wind, Mary nodded. She saw that his strength was not in his body but in his spirit. Few men could face a whole town's laughter and remain calm. She left him to rest, her heart filled with respect. Meanwhile, in the bank office, Paul could not sleep. He sat with the lawyers, his eyes red from worry. We must find a way, he told them. If that man wins, I will lose everything. There must be something in the law that can break his claim, the lawyers whispered among themselves. One said, his papers are strong. They carry the founder's mark. It will be hard to deny them. Another added, unless we prove the old man is unfit, the court may side with him. Perhaps we can question his mind, his memory, his age. Paul's eyes lit with hope. Yes, if he is seen as weak or confused, then no one will trust his claim. We must prepare questions that shake his ground. But even as he planned, doubt crept into his heart. The old man had stood firm against laughter and suspicion. Would he break under questions? Paul was not sure. Still, he clung to the plan, for pride and fear guided him. The next morning, the bank hall filled again. People arrived early, curious to see what would happen. Even children came, sitting on steps outside, waiting for news. The old man entered with his sack, calm as always. He walked to the front, placed the sack on the floor, and stood silently. Paul rose from his chair and faced him. Today, he said, we will test your claim further. Papers are one thing, but a man's memory is another. Tell us if you truly own this land. Do you remember the year, the season, the people who signed it? The old man's eyes shone clear. Without hesitation, he spoke of the year and the day. He named the men. Some long dead, others remembered only in records. He spoke of how they had met him under the shade of an oak tree, and how they had promised him respect. His words were not rushed. They came steady, filled with detail no trickster could invent. The crowd listened in awe. Some whispered that he spoke as if the past lived in front of him. Paul's plan to shake him failed. Instead, the old man's voice grew stronger with each answer. Finally, Paul tried one last attempt. If you are the true owner, then why do you carry this sack everywhere? What is inside it that you guard so carefully? The old man bent down and placed his hand firmly on the sack. His eyes swept across the hall. Inside this sack is not wealth but weight. It holds proof, it holds promises, it holds years of waiting. One day soon you will see it all. For now know that I keep it close because it carries the truth no one can deny. The hall grew silent again. No one laughed. Not even Paul could speak for a moment. The power of the old man's words was like stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through every heart. When the crowd left the bank that day, they no longer called him a fool. They no longer whispered in mockery. They spoke of him with respect, some even with fear. The old man had turned their laughter into silence and silence into belief. The sack remained closed, yet it spoke louder than gold. The town waited quietly as the day of the official meeting arrived. Word had spread that the old man with the sack was coming to make his claim before higher authorities. People gathered near the bank early in the morning, curious to witness history. Some had never seen such confidence in one man. Others whispered among themselves about the weight of truth carried by the old man. Inside the bank, the atmosphere was tense. Lawyers from the town, judges and clerks had filled the hall. Paul, the manager, stood near the front, his expression serious. He had spent days preparing questions, hoping to find a flaw in the old man's story. Yet deep down he felt uneasy. The calm strength of the old man had already shaken his confidence. The old man entered, carrying his sack as always. He walked slowly but with purpose, his eyes steady and full of certainty. When he reached the front, he placed the sack gently on the floor. He did not look around for attention or applause. He only faced the people who would hear his claim. A judge, a tall man with a kind but firm face, spoke first. "We are gathered here to examine the claim of this man regarding ownership of the bank. We will hear his statement, examine his evidence, and then make a fair decision. Speak, sir, and tell us everything you know." The old man bowed slightly and began to speak. "Many years ago, when the town was young, I was asked to help build this bank. I gave the land and agreed to support its construction. The founders promised me ownership once it was built. For 40 years I waited, watching the town grow, trusting in their word. Today I bring proof, letters, and documents that show this promise was real. I have carried these papers in this sack for decades to protect the truth." He opened the sack carefully and took out the bundle of papers in the small wooden box. The crowd leaned forward, watching closely. The judges and lawyers examined the documents with careful hands. The old man spoke calmly as he guided them through each letter, each signature, and each seal. One lawyer asked, "Can you describe the meeting where the promise was made?" The old man nodded. "Yes. It was under the old oak tree at the edge of town. The founders and I sat together. They promised respect and ownership. I remember their words clearly because they shaped the future of this town." "I have never forgotten a detail," the judges murmured. The clarity and memory of the old man impressed even the most skeptical among them. Paul felt a growing fear. No question he could ask seemed able to shake the old man's story. Finally, a judge asked, "Do you seek to take control of the bank immediately, or do you only want recognition of your claim?" The old man's eyes met the judge's. "I do not wish harm to anyone. I only ask that my claim be recognized. If the law confirms it, then I will decide how to proceed. My goal is truth, not conflict." The lawyers examined the documents once more. After careful discussion, they returned to the judge. One spoke, "The papers are genuine. The signatures match the founders' records and the seals are authentic. This man's claim is valid according to the law." A hush fell across the hall. Even Paul could not speak. He realized that the laughter and doubt of the past days had no place here. The old man had carried truth and patience together, and it now stood before everyone. The judge nodded. "It is clear that the claim is rightful. The old man's ownership is confirmed. We recognize his claim to this bank." The hall filled with silence, then slowly with whispers of astonishment. People looked at the old man with respect. Some knelt slightly, not in fear, but in acknowledgement of his patience, strength, and truth. The old man nodded quietly. He placed the papers and box back into the sack, lifted it, and held it close. He spoke softly so only a few could hear. "Truth has weight, but it also has power. Those who respect it will find peace. Those who mock it will only regret it." Paul swallowed hard. He had learned a lesson he would never forget. Power and pride were nothing without truth. Outside the bank, the town watched. People who had laughed before now understood the meaning of patience, strength, and honesty. The old man walked slowly away, his sack still heavy, yet his heart light, and with every step, the town remembered that laughter at truth could turn to regret. but respect for it would last forever. After the court confirmed the old man's claim, the town was filled with a new sense of respect. People no longer spoke of him as a wanderer or laughed at his sack. Instead, they whispered his name with reverence. The bank, once a place of pride and control for Paul, now carried the weight of history and truth. The old man returned to the bank slowly. His sack was on his shoulder as always, but he walked with calm dignity. Inside, the clerks and customers watched him approach. Some bowed slightly, others stared in silence. Every eye followed him as he placed the sack on the floor near the manager's desk. Paul stood near the front. He had spent sleepless nights thinking of what had happened. Now he could only watch. He straightened his coat and met the old man's eyes. There was no anger in his gaze, only understanding and a quiet acknowledgement of truth. The old man spoke first. "I have carried this weight for many years. Today the law has recognized it, but that is only the first step. Respect and care for the truth must continue every day." He opened the sack gently. Inside were the papers, the small wooden box, and a few other items. Letters, tokens, and memories of the years when he had waited patiently. He placed them carefully on the manager's desk. "These are the foundation of this bank. They tell the story of its birth and its promise. Keep them safe. Treat them with respect." Paul nodded slowly. He had no words at first. He looked at the papers, then at the old man, and finally at the sack. He understood now that authority alone was not enough. Truth carried more power than any title or suit. The old man then turned to the clerks and staff. "You work here, but remember, this bank was built on trust. Treat people with fairness and respect every promise. If you do, the bank will flourish and so will the town. If not, even walls of marble cannot protect it." The staff listened in silence. They had seen his patience, his courage, and his knowledge. They realized that this was not just a claim for ownership. It was a lesson for everyone in the room. Outside the bank, the townspeople waited. They had heard that the court had ruled in the old man's favor. As he walked out, some stepped forward to greet him. Children ran to see the man who had carried the sack of truth for so many years. They touched it lightly, curious but respectful. The old man smiled at them. "Do not forget that truth is more valuable than gold. Guard it well and it will guide you in life." He continued down the main street, passing the shops and homes. People stepped aside, giving him space and showing respect. The laughter that had once followed him was gone. Instead, whispers of admiration and wonder replaced it. Paul watched from the window of his office. He realized that the old man had changed not only the bank but the hearts of the people. Pride without truth was fragile, and laughter without understanding could turn to regret. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "I have learned the most important lesson of my life." The old man finally reached the edge of the town. He paused, placed his sack on the ground, and looked back. The bank stood tall. The town stretched out behind it, and the people watched in silence. He had carried his burden for years, but now he felt lighter. The truth had been heard, respected, and honored. He picked up his sack and continued walking, knowing that his duty was complete. The town would remember him not for his age, not for his sack, but for his patience, courage, and the lesson that truth always prevails. And so, the story of the old man with the sack became a tale told for generations. It reminded everyone that mockery fades, pride can crumble, but honesty, patience, and courage endure forever. The bank remained strong and respected, a symbol of what happens when truth is carried faithfully. The old man disappeared down the road, the sun setting behind him, and the town never forgot the day they learned that laughter at truth could lead to regret, but respect for it could bring honor and peace.